Hello, good evening and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 6th of May 2026, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G0KYA. Lovely to see you again. On tonight's show, Steve G0KYA joins us to help us make the most about propagation. We look forward to National Field Day and Radioactive 2026. And we find out what on earth this is, or what it does, or what it's from, or used with, or whatever. If you haven't already emailed us, we've had quite a few entries, then do pop them onto BATC or Facebook chat, and we'll read them out when we come to the that competition. But first, I just want to spend a little bit of time really talking about Radioactive, which is and National Field Day, which is on the 6th and 7th of June. So really just about a month away now. It's something that we've run many, many years. National Field Day, of course, has been running a very long time. And we can have a look at a slide now, which will just give you some idea. If you haven't ever been to this event before, this is really for you, because not everybody else will. If you've been before, you'll know the sort of thing to expect. But basically, firstly, we have two radio stations here who are doing the 24-hour contest, both on CW, which is the main focus of this weekend. It's always the first weekend of June. So that's CW. And we have an SSB Field Day station. It's a 6-metre station, actually. Tammy, I've told you wrong, I think, for this slide. It's a 6-metre Field Day station as well, which is SSB, though. It is voice, that's what I mean. It's not SSB Field Day, though, if you see what I mean. It's a 6-metre contest, though. And what we would like is a bit more help, really, to set up particularly the CW station from 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. I don't think the contest starts until 3, I think I'm right in saying, but we do need some help first thing. So there won't be the scrabble of doing it on the Friday, which often had bad weather. It will be on the morning, but we really need a few muscles. And that, I know this is an obvious thing to say, but you know, this event alone, I think this is going to be number 17 for us. So 17 years plus the COVID years. So we've been running this for around about 20 years now. And of course, the people who were doing it fit and healthy a few years ago, they're still healthy, a lot, most of them, but they're not so fit. So we do need a few younger blood and a bit of new blood, fresh blood, really, to come and help us. So if you can help us on Saturday morning of the 6th, that would be much appreciated. Now, also other things there, and our guest tonight, Steve G0KYA, he's going to be presenting the end-fed half-wave antenna project again. This is something that we've covered before, but this is a multi-band version of the antenna, and it's incredible. I still think it must be the easiest to make and most versatile antenna that most people could make some use of, even if you just hang it out around the back of your garden. And it doesn't, so it's not expensive. The kit will cost something like £20, and you'll be able to find out how to make one there and buy a kit for Radioactive. We've also got construction help advice, just from fellow constructors really, helping here over the weekend, and hopefully a project as well. Nick's looking at a project. I'll be honest, I have asked several times in several newsletters, but we haven't had much feedback for anything for Radioactive, but we're hoping that you're still keen and interested to come, and there will be a project to do to hand make as well. There'll also be a Radioactive super raffle, and then on Sunday Tammy and I will be cooking a sort of Sunday lunch, which normally is a series of sort of roast rolls with vegetarian equivalents as well, alternatives as well. So that's the sort of thing that's happening Saturday the 6th, Sunday the 7th of June. Not long to wait now. Another thing that's very big in our calendar as a club, it's our only real fundraising event for ourselves, and that is our Barford Radio Rally. Now, this radio rally has been running for many, many years, even longer than we've been running it, and we've been running it well over 20 years. I can certainly remember organising it for that long. Before us, it was Raynet who organised it, and it's traditionally always been held in the village of Barford. This is the sort of thing it looks like. It's on Sunday, the 5th of July. We decided to make sure that we had a regular date every year, so that traders in particular knew what was happening and when we were doing it, and we shouldn't have conflicts that way, and we haven't had any local conflicts, at least for some years. So it's at the same place. We've had the venue confirmed. It's at Barford and Ramplingham Village Hall, and the large green, you can see a drone shot there we took. I think Kevin took that a few years ago. You can see lots of the traders. It's a nice traditional radio rally. It is mainly radio parts as well. It's not all the other sorts of things that you sometimes see at some of the huge rallies. And it's only £3 to get in, and you can park your car for free as well. So do save that date, Sunday the 5th of July. I am now taking names of people who can help us. I've already had a couple of people come forward and said I can help you with that. So please, although I will be asking for help formally, if you'd like to help and you're able to, and as always, the more hands the better, especially it does give everybody a chance to have a look round and enjoy it instead of just running on, half a dozen people. So that's the weekend though, Sunday the 5th of July. Drop me an email if you can help. Now every month we have a sked with our twin city of Koblenz in Germany, and it's this Saturday, it's 10 a.m. on the usual frequency, 7.123 megahertz or thereabouts, depending on any QRM or other station activity going on there. It's usually hosted by the net controller is usually Malcolm G3PDH, but this time it's going to be Marco DM5ML from the German side who'll be hosting it as net controller, but there'll also be a local talk in for people in NARC for 145,250 megahertz FM. Now last month actually they couldn't do it. There were people there on both sides, but the propagation was such where we couldn't do it. Maybe we can ask Steve later why that might have been, and maybe we can even really put him on the spot, and I can see him in the corner of a monitor here, by asking him what the propagation will be like on Saturday, if he can tell us. He just pulled a face. Never mind. Sorry, Steve. But anyway, that's this Saturday, the Koblenz Sked, 10 a.m, 7.123 megahertz. A reminder that also on Monday nights we have our Monday Night Net, as hosted by Steve G3EVA, 7:30 on GB3MB. It would be nice to hear a few more voices on there. Now we round to club news or members news, and we've got a picture and a video for you. Firstly, this from Bob G6PWS, who says he just thought he'd send us a little hello from Thailand because he's here for a month, and it's BL **DY hot. I think you can work out what that means, unlike Norfolk today. And he said he couldn't stay up till 10 a.m. to see it live, but watched on Facebook today. The island is Pei, and we're on Koh Lanta Island. So the island in the distance, I guess, is Pei. Thank you very much for sending that to us, Bob. Now, Steve G3VA, who was running the net on Monday night, and I talked to him on that, and he said that several of them had been on the net as well, had been to a car and boat show in Horning on Saturday the 2nd of May, and would I like a little video of it to share here. So we'd love that, and I don't know if you'd like to play it now, Tammy. I think there's a little bit of music in the background, but this is from Steve, obviously a drone shot, unless he was on stilts, maybe pretty high. He said there were at least 4 NARC members attended this. Mike M7TTT, Mike G4DYC, Steve 2E0SZD with his Ford GT40, and Steve G3EVA was there with his Citroen Amy. A great day out in the sunshine.
Some golden oldies there.
There is, isn't there? Trying to look out for anybody I know. Oh, there's Steve underneath it with his hat on, controlling us above him, I think, isn't it? It's going to land on his head. Maybe, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, he stopped it just before that happened. Okay, Steve, thank you very much for that. As always, I always ask you, do share what you're doing. As you can see, they don't have to be anything to do with radio, really. Just interesting to share your news, especially now we're getting into the better weather and you're going out and about. So do always let us know. Just send your emails or your pictures or your news to radio@dcpmicro.com. And if you can send it to us by about 3 o'clock on the next NARC Live, then we'll be sure to include it as well. Thank you very much indeed. Now let's go to that Oh no, sorry, no. Forget that. I haven't forgotten really. I've done all this talking so far, but it's time for me to take a rest and let Tammy share her little people.
Little people, here you go this week then. So are you hungry?
Yeah, you bet, yeah.
What do you reckon that is?
Scrambled egg?
Yeah.
It's cool. I thought clouds were made of cotton wool.
No, they're actually made of egg.
A scrambled egg. I love it.
And a big egg yolk for the sun. I thought it looked really cool.
And
that's actually today's one, that is.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yes, because miniature-calendar.com is the website where we get these from, and you have a new picture every single day. And look at what's the detail in that, because that's just a plate in the background, isn't it? But isn't it lovely? Look, they've lit it in such a way where the aircraft and the clouds are casting shadows on the ground.
So does that mean the egg's floating?
Good. Well, what do you mean? Is the egg floating? Well, yeah, it must be, mustn't it?
There you go. Magic egg as well.
I wonder where you were going with that. Yeah, it sure is. And it's just it's a sort of simple picture when you look at it, but then you think of all the work that went into that as well. And they haven't, doesn't seem to me anyway, got caught up with AI with it. That these are all physical things that they've done. Mind you, I don't think that would be an egg yolk sitting up there.
What?
Do you? Bit of sellotape. Anyway, thank you for sharing that with us, Tammy. So, as I said, what have you been doing? Please do let us know. Send us your news, your pictures. Just take a nice picture somewhere, whatever it is, and just send it to us. It's something for us to share on NARC Live when we meet. Now, 2 weeks ago, we were last here, and we had a competition picture, and we asked you, what on earth is this? Or what's it from? Or what's it for? And we haven't had anybody online give any suggestions, have we?
Oh, we have actually.
Oh, have we?
Mike G0KYA says, I bet it's something to do with a sewing machine.
A sewing machine? Okay, I'll let you find any others there. Steve G3VA, he says, this week's item is an upper knife from an overlocker, which is a type of sewing machine. I used to repair these back in the day.
Phil M7NFV says, I can't take credit for this one, but my wife tells me it's apart from a sewing machine.
Sewing machine? I thought we'd left that behind. Bob GASTU, is this a locking lever for a sewing machine or part of a door locking mechanism?
Tom G6TOM, looks like a pawl. I don't know what a pawl is.
Well, a PAWL as well, isn't it?
Yeah, or a lever from a lock. Do you know what a pawl is?
No, I don't know what a pawl is. I've never heard of that. If you're listening or watching, Tom, maybe you just let us know what a pawl is. But a lever from a lock I can see.
I'll Google it.
No. Wait for see if Tom comes back. But anyway, don't spoil it.
Okay, it's a pivoted, spring-loaded lever or tongue designed to engage with a ratchet wheel or notched gear to prevent backward movement, allow motion in only one direction. Yeah, see, I knew what a pawl was. Yeah,
yeah, right. Okay, Colin G0GMK says, I think this week's what on earth might be a sewing machine attachment.
Ralph 2M0RHT, today's item is a little bit confusing as the tape does not state if it's centimetres or inches. True. Although I'd say that there's 10 in between rather than 8. So maybe
but you can have a tenth of an inch. Yeah, anyway. Okay.
Anyway, this would make a difference to my wild guess, which is either part of a locking mechanism or part of an electric sewing machine mechanism. Whatever, I do believe it's a piece of stainless steel.
He's covered his bases there, you see. He's had both of the answers that we've had are either one or the other, aren't they? Part of a sewing machine or part of a lock.
A lock.
Finally, John J8VP says, it's the missing link. The sewing machine could not work without it. Long live the sewing machine. That's what John says. And anybody else asked anything online?
No, that's
by the
all
way?
online.
So the answer is, it may not surprise you to know, is...
It's actually a cutting knife on an overlocker, which is a part of a sewing machine.
Right.
There we go.
And Emma 2E0KF sent us that. That's fantastic.
I can feel Nev looking down on us.
You put that lovely... A dear friend who's sort of departed now, M0NFY Nev. He's the first one when we've been doing this years and years now, and he came up with this idea, didn't he? Every time we put something on,
every time it was part of a sewing machine.
He said, "Is that a part of a sewing machine?" And we ended up sort of saying, "No, it's not part of a sewing machine." But it sort of had its life of its own, and it's lovely to see it come back. So Emma, I don't know if you knew that, Emma. You may not have even been a member of the club in those days, but it's lovely to receive that picture from you. I'm just going to put a plug as well before we show you this month. This week's rather. We really are looking for more items as well. So if you have an unusual item, it needs to stand some chance of someone knowing what it is really. Otherwise, we find people just don't enter. But some unusual tool, gadget, whizmo, whatever that you could send us a picture of, and we'd love to include it. Why are you smiling?
Whizmo.
Well, it's an alternative gizmo.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Did you say it wrong?
Maybe. Moving on.
Anyway,
let's have a look at the new competition question. We've got to explain this one a bit, haven't we? Anyway, what on earth is this? No, I know what's going to be. People are writing now.
So we should just say, obviously, the money was put there to show scale. So whereas Emma used a tape measure, this person used a fiver. which
Yes.
is quite intuitive, really.
And actually, thinking that Ralph, our Scottish correspondent, is the one who complained that he didn't know whether it was in millimetres or inches or centimetres or inches. These are English. Sorry, Ralph. £5 and £10 notes. So anyway, as Tammy explained, this person then gave us this picture with the notes for scale. But what is this? It has a particular name and it has a particular use. I didn't know this. Did you know this, by the way? What it was?
No.
No, I didn't. So that's neither of us knew. But you have actually 3 weeks to answer. So don't put it off, though, you'll forget. But we're not meeting for online and for another 3 Wednesdays. 2 Wednesdays break and then another one. So if you know what that is, just drop us a line to radio@dcpmicro.com and then you can be first out of the hat when it comes to us revealing what that is and the answers and the questions that we've had for it. Can you hear a microphone noise? Is that your...
That's me. It's because my...
That's okay. As long as it's my mic.
No, my wire
failing.
keeps touching my mic.
Okay, so there we are. You've had it for a bit longer. We will be putting this on Facebook and on our newsletter as well. So, as I said, we're pleased, though, if you send us any more interesting type gadgets or Wizmos that people don't know what they are. That would be great for the competition. Now, before we meet tonight's guests and talk about propagation, just the time to tell you what's happening this week in the club. So Saturday, as I said earlier, Sked on 7.123 megahertz, hosted by Marco. There is a local talkie there on 145.250, and you might want to use that because, said last time, some people thought, well, they maybe couldn't get through and talk to others. So if the propagation isn't great or something wrong with your station or something, that's a great way of finding out. So there's a 2-meter talk-in on 145.250. On Sunday, at 7 p.m, we've got the GB2RS News at 7 o'clock on GB3MB. And then on Monday night at 7:30, we've got the Monday Night Net with Steve G3EVA. And then next Wednesday, it's a social informal at CNS between 7 and 9:30 and Bright Sparks for our younger members. And the following Wednesday, unusually, but it's also a social informal at CNS as well. And of course, we would love to have your stories and pictures and mystery objects as well. And of course, our NARC card, which we send maybe not one a week nowadays, but we do send it about a couple of months, I'd say, to anybody that you feel will be cheered by a card from your club. We'll add your name to ours and send them off. Just send us their name and address and details of what we're sending the card for. Now, it's been said many times over the years we've been doing NARC Live and we've had talks on it. Propagation is something which we do talk about quite often. But actually, if you think about it, we can have all the best equipment, the best aerials and all the other stuff that we talk about. But without the right propagation, we can't do anything really in this hobby. So tonight we've got the chair of the Propagation Studies Committee of the RSGB with us, and more than that, is a member and a good friend of NARC as well. So welcome, Steve, G0KYA.
Yes, good evening. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm all right.
Recovered from Caister?
Sorry. What's propagation going to be like on Saturday? I winced because we're not too sure.
Oh.
Yeah, there's been a coronal hole that has been Earth-facing, and it was Earth-facing yesterday, or the day before yesterday and yesterday, which means that there's probably going to be a coronal or a high-speed solar stream hitting the Earth maybe tomorrow, which could push the KP index up. Now, that could affect propagation tomorrow and Friday, but may not impact on Saturday, but it could. We don't know.
But for the sake of those quite new to the hobby, and there are quite a few, is that a good or a bad thing? Because we know that the sun can have a huge effect either way, can't it, to the propagation?
I'm going to go into that tonight, but it's a bad thing. I mean, basically, it pushes down MUFs and causes noisy bands. If the KP index goes up, it's not good news. So it's touch and go really as to whether the conditions are going to keep bad over into the weekend. But we'll know tomorrow if the KP index goes up tomorrow, which is bound to, I think, if we get this high-speed stream from this coronal hole that we've seen. So yeah, it's the trouble with propagation is that the further you have to look forward, the harder it gets.
Yes,
it takes one solar flare And there's quite a lot of sunspots on the sun at the moment. So it only takes one solar flare to wipe everything out for an hour. So it's tricky. It's a difficult one. I would put the chances of good propagation on Saturday at about 50-50 at the moment.
Really? Yeah, another a mutual friend of ours, and of course a member of the club, is Jim G0KYA. And with weather, he says really that whatever anybody predicts, that's all based on modelling, and he really can only see 2 or 3 days out. Would you say that propagation was similar or even shorter time frame on forecasting than that, for accurate forecasting?
I think it's a kind of a combination of a number of things. I think we can kind of predict sort of a week ahead. We can predict a month ahead, actually, because we can look at what happened a month ago or 27 days ago, and then the sun rotated around again. So if we had really bad propagation 27 days ago, then we can pretty much guarantee we're going to have pretty poor propagation again. So that's one way of looking at it. The next thing is, well, can we see what is happening sunspot-wise? Yes, we can. We can see that, but we don't know when any of them are going to emit a solar flare or coronal mass ejection. And we're on the downward portion of the cycle now, which is when they're more prevalent. So it's a little bit tricky. I know I do GB2RS propagation every week, and trying to predict what's going to be happening in the following sort of 7 or 8 days is difficult. And NOAA, who we get all the figures from, that's the North American brigade who look after the space weather for us, they can't do it. And the Met Office can't predict more than 4 hours, 4 days into the future. So yeah, it's tricky.
So you do your. I won't keep you long, Steve, because you've got a presentation I know you want to deliver. But just finally, so then this is about the time. In fact, it's overnight normally, isn't it? Tonight, into the early hours of tomorrow. When generally tomorrow you issue your propagation forecast. Will you be holding it back a little bit? Can you do that for publication wise, just to see if we get that coronal ejection? You're
absolutely right. If a high-speed solar wind stream hits the Earth, it tends to be in the early hours of the morning, around about midnight, actually, or it'll be 1 a.m. now. So by tomorrow, we'll have a better idea, but because that won't impact what's happening next week. So we it's a lot of ifs and maybes, and it may do this and it may do that. I learned this trick off Jim. When we talk about propagation, we say it may do this or it may do that. We don't say it will. So we
and then you're covered. All right, Steve. Well, I'll let you get on with your presentation. As always, to everyone at home, if you want to ask questions of Steve or make any comments or anything like that, then please do it during Steve's talk and we'll read them to him at the end. But now over to you, Steve, G0KY.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This is a talk, Understanding HF Propagation. It's a talk that I've given before, and we produced a video from a few years ago. But then we decided that there's so many new members in the club, and it'd be a good idea to kind of update it a little bit and add some more information to it and give it to you again. So if you've already seen this presentation on YouTube, I'm sorry, but as I said, it has changed a little bit and been improved, so we can go for it. So we're going to look at the sun. What are the good parts of the sun? What are the bad parts of the sun? Then we'll look at propagation, and we'll explain some of the terms that are used, such as SFI, solar flux index, and the K indices, as we were just talking about. We'll explain those and the sort of effects you can get for propagation, what gives us good propagation, HF propagation, what gives us bad HF propagation, and see how it goes. So we'll start off by looking at the sun anyway. And the sun emits massive amounts of electromagnetic ionizing radiation, basically. We're looking at ultraviolet and X-rays. And the sun's been doing it for millions of years and will continue to do it for millions of years. So although we have a fair idea of what's going on, we're not very good at predicting what's going to happen in the future. So put simplistically, it says here that the more sunspots, the more ionization we get, more ultraviolet radiation, and therefore we get it's the ultraviolet radiation that ionizes the ionosphere and gives us the HF conditions that we need. And we can measure this output from the sun at 2.8 gigahertz, that's 10.7 centimeters. Now, it's not that radiation, it's not that 2.8 gigahertz radiation that causes the ionosphere, but it's kind of I think we look at it as as a guide to what we can see. The trouble is, you can't measure the ultraviolet output on the Earth, on the surface of the Earth, because the ozone layer absorbs an awful lot of it. So we use this as a proxy. We measure it at 2.8 gigs, 10.7 centimeter wavelength. We use that as a proxy for how much radiation is coming off the sun. And we use that amount of energy, and it gives us something called a solar flux index, an SFI figure, and that we can use. So we'll talk about that. So this SFI, today it was 128, which is not bad, not brilliant, but it can be as high as 274. 274 was in 2001. And it can be as low as 65 or 66, which we had for months on end back in 2008. And it can even get up to 300. So you can see there's a chart of the solar flux index over time. This was for solar cycle 25. And where we are today is where the track actually stops there. That shows us we're now into 2026. We're on the downward portion of the solar cycle. And we're okay for a couple of years, maybe to about the end of 2028, before things start to get really slow again. So we have passed solar maximum, definitely. That was in August 2024. And we had a peak SFI of 245.6. And an SFI of 245.6 is enough to give you good propagation around the world, especially on 10 meters. With an SFI of 128, which we've got now, it's struggling a little bit. It'll struggle to get to 21 megahertz, basically. So we've seen the best of the HF propagation for a few years anyway. So we'll have to wait until the next sunspot maximum, which will be in, let's add 11 onto that. What do we end up with? 2035, I think, is the next sunspot maximum. And this is another chart, and this shows you the smooth sunspot number. So the other one looked at the solar flux index, and this one looks at the sunspot number. So you can see again, it's pretty much the same shape, and it shows that we're on the downward portion of the sunspot cycle, and we had a peak of sunspot number of 216 back in August, so that the two correlate very well. There's not a complete correlation between this smooth sunspot number and solar flux index, but it's not bad. It's a good proxy for what's actually going on, and it can be measured, as I said, on the Earth at 10.7 gigahertz. So it's a good measure. You can do it on cloudy days, which is, if you're looking for sunspot numbers and it's cloudy, you're a bit stuffed. Well, we've got satellites to do that now anyway, but that's the thing. So that's two terms we've just introduced then: smooth sunspot number, or moving average sunspot number, and solar flux index. So what effect does that have? Well, this is a chart, or graph if you like, that shows you the path between the UK and New York in October for solar flux levels of 65 and 275. So the green trace down the bottom is the sort of propagation you could expect with a solar flux index number of 65. And the yellow trace above it is what you would get if you had 275. So October is a really good month for working the states on the higher bands. And you can see there that at sunspot maximum at 275, the MUF is up there sort of 35 megahertz or higher even. So this means that 10 meters, 28 megahertz is well open. And it starts off around about sort of midday and continues until sunset. But sunspot minimum, you can see there that the MUF is probably struggling to get to 18 megahertz. So probably 14 megahertz is going to be the only band, or the higher band, that you could actually work New York at sunspot minimum. But never fear, okay, we are heading for sunspot minimum, but it's a few years away yet, and there's still some good propagation to come. But that just shows you what a difference sunspots make. If it got to the stage, I think, years ago, where people were complaining that the propagation was so good that they could work the states, even into evening time, nighttime, after the sun had set. And I can see with an MUF of 30 megahertz, I'm not surprised. But it just shows you that the sun really does boost and rule HF propagation, especially on the higher bands. So that's the good side of the sun, sunspots. But what about the bad side? Well, first thing we can look at is solar flares, and there's a solar flare there on the picture. If you look at the upper left-hand side of the picture, you can see a bright spot. Now, solar flares are basically explosions of energy, and we get them with high sunspot activity. We get them on the downward side of the sunspot cycle, which is what we're having right now. And they're intense ultraviolet and X-rays that come off a solar flare. And they can cause massive D-layer absorption and therefore poor conditions. We'll have a look at that, a graph of that in a minute. So these are very, very, very hard to predict. You know that you've got sunspots, but if they're about to emit a flare, it's very hard to say, yes, we're definitely going to have a flare today and it's going to happen at this time. It doesn't work like that. We have a probability that we may have a solar flare. And I would say that the two sunspot groups that are closest to being Earth-centric at the moment are both solar flare candidates, really, in the coming days. Which again, it could wipe out certainly 40 meters. It could wipe out for an hour. So that was another reason why I was wincing about, saying what are conditions going to be like on Saturday. If we had a solar flare just as the net started, the chances are it would wipe out that contact for up to an hour. And I can't predict it. We don't know. We just have to put up with it. But as I said, the solar flare has intense ultraviolet, extreme ultraviolet and X-ray output, and that buries itself deep into the D layer of the ionosphere and causes absorption and poor conditions. Now, they class solar flares according to their severity. So we have A, B, C, M, and X class solar flares according to the peak flux in watts per square meter. Now, X class solar flares are the big ones. They are we haven't had many of those. M class solar flares are quite common. We've had quite a few of those in the last month, and I think we can have up to maybe 10, 12 M class flares a week. X class flares a little bit more hard to come by. Maybe once a month, maybe. C class flares, we get a lot of them, and they don't really have much effect. They're not too bad, actually. But as I said, each X-ray class category is divided into a scale. So an X2 flare is twice as powerful as an X1 flare, and 4 times as more powerful than an M5 flare. But I wouldn't worry too much about the numbers. An X-class flare is an X-class flare. That's all you really need to know. M-class flare are worth taking note of because they will cause problems, but they're not going to be as bad as an X-class flare. An X-class flare, if we get them, can, as I say, wipe out the bands for up to an hour, where an M-class flare might just wipe out the bands for maybe 20 minutes or so. But do they affect all the bands? Well, in a way they do, but we'll have a look at that in a minute. I just want to give you some idea of how much energy is coming off a solar flare. And the energy is, I've classed it in joules here, so it's easy to just compare one thing to another. So the atom bomb that dropped on Hiroshima released 6.3 times 10 to the 13 joules. That's a 6 followed by 13 noughts. So that gives you some idea. And the world's biggest hydrogen bomb released 2 times 10 to the 17 joules of energy. And that was the Russian Tsar bomber, which blew windows out at about 130 miles away, I think. So a solar flare can release up to 10 times 20 joules of energy. So that's at least 1,000 times more powerful than the biggest hydrogen bomb that the Earth has ever seen. And it can be up to 10 times 25 joules. So again, that's up to 10 to the 8 more power than the biggest hydrogen bomb. So it gives you some idea of how much energy we're talking about. We're talking about enormous amounts of energy. And this is the effect it has. If we had a solar flare, you can see if you were on 5 megahertz, it could decrease propagation there, completely kill propagation for up to an hour or so. But on 20 megs, for instance, you may barely see any effect at all. And on 10 meters, you might not see any effect at all. Maybe just a little, maybe at the start, a little bit of a dip, but then it soon recovers. So it's the lower frequencies that are affected more or most than the upper frequencies. And the trouble is as well that solar flares are linked to something called a coronal mass ejection. When this flare goes off, often, not every time, but often, you get a massive release of solar matter as well. Tons and tons, millions of tons of solar matter can be thrown off at the same time, often ejected into space at 600 kilometers per second or more. Give you some idea, put that into context, that's 1.35 million miles per hour. So they're fast. And so you've got this massive pile of plasma being thrown at you. And if the Earth is in the way, that's when we get big problems. That's the one that causes issues. And that's probably what caused the last Koblenz to fail miserably. You can see there that it says there's a little dot there, and that's the size of the Earth. So these solar flares and coronal mass ejections are massive, absolutely massive compared to the size of the Earth. So if a coronal mass ejection is Earth-facing, as we say, it's coming directly towards Earth, you can see that that lot hitting the Earth has a massive effect on propagation. So how long does it take for the solar wind or CME to hit the Earth? Well, we did some calculations here. And if we say that the coronal mass ejection or the solar wind is traveling at 400 to 800 kilometers per second, which is what it does, it takes about 2 to 4 days, 2.1 to 4.3 days to hit the Earth. So we know that this coronal hole has been facing the Earth maybe a day and a half ago now, it might be 2 days tomorrow. So this is why we think that tomorrow will not be good, that the K index will go up as this stuff hits the Earth. And so we can kind of estimate roughly how long it takes for this stuff to hit the Earth. And so this is why it's so difficult to absolutely say, oh yes, this is definitely going to happen. But until stuff hits the first satellite or spacecraft, we don't really know how fast it is. So that's why it's a bit vague at the time. Now, when this material hits the Earth's magnetic field, it distorts the Earth's magnetic field badly. And all this material then flows to the magnetotail, as it's called, which is the back end of the magnetosphere around the Earth. And this is more likely to happen, and this is where it gets technical. This magnetic field, this plasma, if you like, has a frozen-in magnetic field as it comes off the sun. And that field can change, but if it's predominantly pointing south, the magnetic field points south, we say it more easily couples with the Earth's magnetic field and we get more problems. So if you have a north-facing BZ or magnetic field, interplanetary magnetic field, it's less likely to have effects on the Earth. So there we go. So we don't know if we're going to get a coronal mass ejection or a solar wind stream off the sun. We don't know how fast it is, so it's difficult to say when it's going to hit. And we don't know what its magnetic field is like until it hits the Earth as well. So yeah, a serious coronal mass ejection with a south-pointing magnetic field can cause chaos and really, really wreck the bands for a couple of days or so. So how do we measure this? Well, you can go to a gauge, which is at solarham.com. And if I'm trying to work out which one it is, it's the speed one is the yellow trace on there, I think. Yes, the yellow trace. So if that goes up, and the top trace is the BZ, whether it's pointing north or south, and you can see there that, let's have a look. This is the south pointing BZ, but then it flips and goes north, look. Then it goes south again, it goes north. So this period of a south facing BZ there, which was probably over a few hours, that would impact the Earth's magnetic field far, far more. So we can look at the density here. This is a fairly calm day, actually. And the speed, so if the speed goes up, the density goes up, and this BZ points south, that's not good news. So if you want to have a look at this, go to solarham.com and find the space weather chart. And this is from the ACE spacecraft, NASA's ACE spacecraft. But so tomorrow I would expect to see this speed has gone up and BZ has gone down south. And from that, we could say that the K index is going to go up as well, so which will tell us that it's bad news. So there's all these tools that we can, call upon now to give us a better idea of what's going on. But it's not much of a forecast. It's kind of a real-time look at what's going on. So as I said, if the BZ goes south, that's the interplanetary magnetic field goes south, not good news. The solar wind speed picks up to 450 plus kilometers per second. That's not good news. And if the density goes up as well, that's not good news. So we've got all this solar matter, particles, or plasma, if you like, hitting the Earth, and that's what causes the problems. That's what causes aurora. You've probably heard of aurora. You may have even seen the aurora. But it's this stuff being channeled towards the poles on the Earth that causes the problems. It causes the aurora, and aurora generally is not good news for HF propagation. And to give you some idea of the field strength of the Earth magnetic field is about 50,000 nanoteslas. And an MRI machine, which you may be more familiar with, is about 1,000 million nanoteslas. So the Earth's magnetic field is not that strong at all, really. But it's enough to be bent. It can be bent and impacted by this stuff hitting the Earth. And it's that distortion of the Earth's magnetic field that affects magnetometers, and we use that to measure the KP index around the world. So here's a chart then. The K index, at the moment, I think it's about 1 or 2. Been 1 or 2 all day. It's been pretty good. Earlier this week, it did get up to 6 or 7, again, due to the solar wind speed going up. And tomorrow, well, who knows? Let's guess that it's going to go up to maybe 4, maybe 5, which is not terribly good, and will impact conditions on the Earth. And the K indexes are measured by magnetometers on the Earth. And there are magnetometers all over the place, and they bring all this information together and call it a planetary K index. So an average index, if you like, and we call that the KP index. And so the one you want to look for is the KP index, the planetary K index, which is a measure of the average distortion of the Earth's magnetic field around the world. So yeah, if we get KP equals 7 or something, I mean, Jim often says this in his VHF report in GB2RS. KP of 7 gives you an aurora. Gives you really bad conditions on HF, gives you noisy bands and low MUFs. So the effects on HF then, well, so initially, when it first hits, conditions can just slightly improve. And you think, oh, this is good. But it doesn't last very long. It's called a pre-auroral enhancement, and then things die down very quickly. So you find that the MUF, that's the maximum usable frequency, it drops as the F layer is depleted. Northern and polar paths will be the worst hit. So if you're trying to work somebody on HF in, I don't know, what should we say, the Canary Islands, probably have very little effect. But if you're trying to work somebody further afield, or you're trying to work somebody in Iceland or Norway, it probably wouldn't work terribly well. And I think this is one of the things that people don't really understand. They always look for a high solar flux index. Oh, we want sunspots, lovely. But I would prefer quieter geomagnetic conditions, to be honest, because recovery can take days. If you have a really bad geomagnetic storm, it can take a few days to recover. So I would take lower K index numbers and over a high solar flux index all the time. Otherwise, you get the effect that we had with Koblenz last month, which is when you couldn't work anybody in Germany. And it could happen again. So yeah, always look for the K index. It's very, very important. to see what the KP index is doing. I say K index, I should say KP index. See what the KP index is doing. If it goes above about 3, it's starting to look bad. And if it goes above 7, yes, you've got real problems. And as I said, the good news is if it goes to KP of 7, then you've got auroral conditions. So you can work VHF auroral contacts on 2 meters, 6 meters as well. So it's not the end of the world. It's just a different type of propagation. But as a die-hard HF lover, I prefer a low KP index of the sort of 1s and 2s. And over a period of about 3 days, that gives you a very stable ionosphere, as we've had today, and conditions really pick up. So the KP index is a 3-hourly measure. So if the KP index goes up, you know that that's, or the current sort of 3-hourly period K index goes up, you know that things are happening. Now, another way of looking at it is something called the AP index, but that's an average over 24 hours. So it's very possible that the KP index is going up, but the A index doesn't do anything because it takes 24 hours to catch up. So if you're trying to work out what conditions are like now, I would look at the KP index because it's only ever going to be up to 3 hours old. And that will tell you exactly what's going on, where the AP index, not so good. It's an average over 24 hours. And okay, I think, you know, if you look at it tomorrow, you may see it's gone up a little bit. But I bet you tomorrow the KP index will go up before you see the A index go up, just the way it's measured. So something you can get if you have this high KP index and this auroral conditions, we get polar cap absorption. So any signals that follow a polar path cut through the auroral zone, that causes problems. So if you were trying to work the west coast of Canada, G to V7 as I put here, you would find it very difficult under a high KP index. So auroral conditions, as I said, generally affect polar paths more than north-south paths. So it's not a good time. If you desperately want to work the west of Canada, you're not going to do it when the K index is high. So let's just talk about the regions again, or layers. We sometimes use the word layers. Sometimes I think it's better to think of them as regions. They're not distinct layers as such. They are areas or regions of the ionosphere that cause problems or give us propagation. So the F region is the top region, about 300 odd kilometers up, 400 kilometers up. That's really in 2. It starts off when the sun comes up, it breaks into 2, an F1 region and an F2. And after sunset, they combine. And they're usually used for propagation in the 1.8 to 30 megahertz range. And that's the region that's going to give you the furthest distances. So, you know, the F region is the one that's the thinnest, if you like, in terms of ionization, because it's so high up. But it does give you the best results. The E region, slightly lower, is mostly oxygen ions, oxygen plus ions. And this is used to propagate signals in the lower HF spectrum, so 1.8 to 7 megahertz, for example. And it also gives us the sporadic E conditions, which are now about to start going exciting again. Once we get into May, we get into the sporadic E season, and you suddenly get very loud openings out to about 1,300 kilometers on 28 megs and 50 megs. So it's the region that's, as I said, responsible for the sporadic E, or the region isn't responsible, but it's the region that's, gets the effects of sporadic E. I'm not going to go into what they are. We'll leave that one for another day with Jim. But it's, have a look now. Have a look sort of mid-morning or early afternoon to late afternoon on 28 megs. And you may be lucky enough to find some sporadic E conditions. And you'll know they're sporadic E. Of course, there'll be stations within about 1,300 miles or 1,300 kilometers. So Germany, Sweden, Finland, that kind of distance. And they'll be very, very loud. They'll be S9. But they're not reliable. You know, you might be able to work them 1 minute and the next minute they disappear. But that's the E region anyway. And then finally we come down to the lower region there, the D region, which is basically an absorption zone, an absorption area. It's absorbing, the signals. But I'll tell you, the quickest way of thinking about it is medium wave. If you listen to medium wave during the day, you'll hear up to a certain distance, but you won't hear much from abroad. But then as the sun sets and the D region starts to disappear, you can suddenly hear stations all over Europe. And that's why, because this D region's disappeared. And that allows the signals to go up a little bit further into the E region and get, bounce back down again. So this D region, it's an absorption region, and it cuts down signals, especially on 1.8 to 7 megahertz. Has slightly less effect on 10 meters and 20 meters, but it's there, and it's there during sunlight, during the daylight anyway. So we talked there about, layers and what we're talking about. So we talk about the critical frequency. What is this critical frequency? Well, it's the frequency at which, if you send a signal straight up into the ionosphere, does it go straight the way through into space, or does it get bounced back down? And there's always a higher figure that we call the critical frequency, which is the frequency at which it just comes down. So you might see in this case that it's a critical frequency was roughly sort of 5 megahertz. And yes, this means you can talk to somebody about 100 miles away, and that will be via the F2 layer, and everything in the garden is rosy. But if you go up to 10 megahertz, you won't be able to work people around the UK because the critical frequency is now so high. Well, you are trying to use something above the critical frequency, and your signal is going straight out into space. This is probably what happened with the Koblenz SCED a month ago, that the critical frequency became lower than 7 megahertz. And so the signals weren't going to Germany, they were going straight out into space because of these effects of this solar wind that had affected the K index. I think that's probably what the problem was. So yeah, the critical frequency is important. And from that, we can work out the maximum usable frequency over different path lengths. So it's quite an important figure to use. But that's the critical frequency. It's known as FOF2. But don't worry about that too much. Just remember it's the critical frequency. Now we can work all this out using a digisonde. These are elements that fire. They're around the UK and Europe and worldwide. They send a signal straight up into the ionosphere and see what happens. And from this is one from the Chiltern ionosonde, and we can see there that we've got a critical frequency which is a straight up signal of about 4.625 megahertz, and that's the what would it be? That would be the red trace here. We can just see where it starts to go up and then it just disappears. So about 4.6 megs. So that's the critical frequency of the F layer there. It also tells us over 100 kilometers we could maybe get 5.2 megahertz, because obviously as we go to further distances, our angle of attack, as it were, is coming down, so we can still bounce signals off the ionosphere. And over a 3,000 kilometer path, we've got a maximum usable frequency of 14.9 megahertz. And that's all down here on the bottom. So this is okay, and it tells us what we need to know, but they're a little bit difficult to read. So this is why PropQuest is so useful, because it basically takes that information and plots it for you. So you don't have to do any mathematics. You don't have to be able to read an ionosonde. And propquest.co.uk, I think it is, isn't it? It's a very, very useful tool for telling you what the critical frequency is, what the maximum usable frequency is over different distances. So you could see from that immediately, I would imagine, that when Koblenz was on, that, yeah, you needed a much lower frequency to get to Germany. Basically, your signals were going straight up. So how do radio waves bounce back to Earth? I've used the term bounce there. It's more of a total internal reflection. It's not so much a bounce as a refracted ray. And you can see there that we've got a ray going up, if we start from the left, and it's bent, but it carries on into space. And as we come down and down and down, we get a point where we get total internal reflection and the radio waves come back to Earth. So we need to work at that frequency or that lower frequency to get our signals to bounce back to Earth. So when we use the term bounce, it's not really a bounce as such. It's a total internal reflection, but it's a lot easier to say bounce, I think. So let's talk about this D layer again. And this is the absorbing layer, if you remember. It's an average height of about 60 to 90 kilometers. And it's mainly responsible for absorbing and attenuating signals, which is why we don't hear much skip on the LF bands during daylight, especially in the summer when there's much more sunlight going on. So this is why 3.5 megahertz, 80 meters is so bad at the moment, because two things. One, it's summer. And secondly, because the solar flux index is still quite high. But come winter and come when we're a little bit further down the sunspot cycle, you'll find 80 meters suddenly useful again during the day. What we may get to that point where 40 meters, which is mainly around the UK and Europe band, is not so useful. You may find it just doesn't do it for you. And this is why, I mean, when we're at Caister with the Marconi station, we don't use 80 meters at all, because this time of year and this point of the sunspot cycle, the band will pretty much close due to delay absorption. So we go straight to 40 meters and use that, and we can work around the UK and we can get into Europe very easily on 40 meters, and it goes great guns. It's a band that just carries on all day for us. So the actual level of absorption is dependent on the frequency, the time of day, the time of year, and also the solar and geomagnetic levels. So as I said, at the moment, delay absorption is quite high. Of course, we're just past sunspot maximum, and the solar flux index is still quite good, actually. So this is why we need to go up in frequency to actually get anywhere, because this delay layer is absorbing everything at lower frequencies. So there's the equation for absorption. Now that's pretty horrid, but we can take that and sum it up as the lower the frequency, the more the absorption. That's what it means, because it's got a frequency squared figure underneath it. So that's all you need to know, that the lower the frequency, the more the absorption. So yeah, this is why 1.8 and 3.5 megs are not very good in the daylight, in daytime anyway, in this time of year. But come winter, and maybe with the solar flux index going down a little bit, they will be much, much better. And you will suddenly find 3.5 megs becomes more useful around the UK. So if we brought this together, what do we actually end up with? Well, this shows you a path. There we go. And this shows you the lowest usable frequency you can use. You can see that during daylight, of course, this delay absorption, we have to use a higher frequency to cater for it. You may find that your lowest usable frequency there is maybe up to sort of 8 megahertz or something. So then we add in the other layers. We put the MUF, the maximum usable frequency, for a path, and you can see that basically you've got to work in this sort of band in the middle between the lowest usable frequency and the maximum usable frequency. Something we call the frequency of maximum. I can't remember. It's French, isn't it? Frequency of optimum travel, I think it's called, or FOT, which is usually about 85% of the MUF, the maximum usable frequency. So this is why we are working higher in frequency during the day, and we come down lower in frequency at night, as when the sun goes down. So you may find 7 megahertz is okay for around Europe, not a problem at all. But you may find that at night time, you may find that 7 megahertz keeps on going for you, and you can actually work the world. So, but during the day, you may find that 28 megs or 21 megs is much, much better for you. So this is why you can't really guarantee that using the same frequency for day and night is going to work for you. You must come down in frequency as the sun sets. Oops, there we go. So let's talk about some of the online tools that you can use to actually help you with this. Well, the first one is VOACAP Online. A very good program, fantastic program, but it's been put online now. You used to have to install it yourself, and it's not the easiest of things to use, but you can use VOCAP online, and this shows you a typical sort of plot for this particular day. It's April at 10 o'clock in the morning, and you can see that the red areas, the hot areas, are the most likely areas you're going to be able to work. So you can work up into Iceland, definitely, maybe even get to work into the Caribbean. But the chances of working the States, pretty slim. The chances of working Africa, pretty slim. And Australia, absolutely non-existent. So this is why VOCAP is a brilliant program for just generally having a look at what's available, what you can actually work with it. And so you can go to VOCAP online, and this is do an area graph like this. You can put a pointer where you are. We're here in Eastern England, and this shows you the first skip zone. So there's nothing you can work around there. Then it comes in again, you can see. So it's a good band here. 14 megahertz should be possible to work Africa, the very north tip of Africa, or definitely most of Europe anyway. So this is, I would say, this is a good one to get. And you can specify what antennas you're using, what mode you want, what power you're running, so you can actually end up with a graph that more accurately reflects your actual conditions. And then VOCAP, you can also do point-to-point circuit reliability charts as well. So this is the UK to New York, and that's London to New York. Trying to see what, there we go. Smooth sort of number 62. Right, okay, I don't know. Oh, here we go, April 2014 this was, but I mean, pretty much the same as April this year. So you can see there that during the daytime, this MUF goes up, as we said, and obviously this absorption layer comes up as well, so we need to work in this area here. So it shows you that if you wanted to work New York, your best bands to be on would probably be somewhere between, what should we say there, about 14 megahertz, maybe higher, up to about 21 megahertz possible, or 17 meters, I reckon. 18 megahertz would be ideal for you where that bar is there. That would work for you during the day. At night, different story again. So 10 megahertz will work for you across that band there, or even maybe 7 megahertz on that particular path. So this is a really good way. If you're trying to know you definitely want to work a specific area, this is a great way of putting charts together that show you the best times to work various parts of the world. This is another thing you can do with VOCAP online, is you can come up with this, this circle, 24-hour circle, propagation circle we call it, that shows you the best time. So again, this is the path from the UK to New York. And you can see that if you wanted to work on 20 meters, then according to this, there we go, it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock would be the best time of this particular month. I can't remember what month I chose, but just to show you. But you can see that trying to work them, that path on 20 meters in the night, absolutely pointless. So you need to come down in frequency to maybe 30 meters there, 30 megahertz, 10 megahertz, or even come down to, where are we there, 40 meters, 7 megahertz. So this is another great way of very quickly getting yourself a chart for the month that shows you the best time to work a particular station. And I've used these charts a lot. When I did my Worked All States Award, I ended up with 2 states that were really hard to get. Wyoming was one, I think. I can't remember what the other one was, South Dakota, I think. There's not that many hams there in the first place, but using a chart like this, you could work out the best band to be on to actually work them. So I'd thoroughly recommend that you have a look at VOCAP online and have a play with these charts that you can use. Now, the other way of doing it is to use the RSGB propagation tables, which are in Radcom every month, produced by Gwyn Williams, G0KYA. And what we did there is to take 26 locations. I think it's actually 24, and 2 of them have got long path as well. And this shows you, if you find the place you want to work, like Mauritius, there we go. You come along here and you look for a high number. This is basically the S meter reading that you might expect. So you can see for Mauritius there, 20 meters, 40 megahertz. You've got a couple of little pointers there. I can't see what the numbers are, probably 8 or 9. But what you don't want to do is try and work Mauritius during the daytime, There's no chance at all. At night, yes, there is. But basically, we've just changed this so that now, if you've got just one little dot there, that means the chance of making a contact is pretty minimal. If you've got two dots, that means you might be able to work them on FT8 or Whisper. So you might be able to hear them on Whisper. So we changed it because we were using letters and I just looked so messy and confused the hell out of everybody. So we changed it. So if you've got a red number, that's I think that gives you 60 to 90% chance of working them. So you can see there that Moscow is pretty easy to work on nearly all these bands, really. But if you come down to somewhere like Vancouver, no, you're not going to work them on 10 meters, 12 meters, 15 meters, whatever. But you might just be able to work them on, what should we say? Let's go for this one here. So probably early hours of the morning on 10 megs, 30 meters, will give you a fairly high number. So these charts, they're based on 100 watts sideband to a dipole. And they're the quick and easy way of looking at what you can possibly work. You've got the times across the top here. So from 0 hours to 0200, 0400, 0600, etc. And then you just look for a higher number and a red color, which is a higher probability of you being able to work this station. So they're okay, but the problem with the charts are it's 100 watts to a dipole. Now, what happens if you've got a better antenna than a dipole? You've got a 3-element Yagi up in the sky, or you're running more power, or you're using FT8. So we worked at this and we looked at this and we tried all sorts of different ideas, but basically we've only got one page to play with, and we can't use too much color. So we had to think again. So I went and worked with the authors of VOCAP and also the authors of a program called ITU RHF Prop, which is a mouthful, I know, so we call it Proppy, and said, look, could you kind of do this, but give people a chance to actually put in their own station, in terms of their power output, their antenna gain and everything else. So they said, yeah, leave it with us, we'll do it. And they did. So now, I'm just going to go past that one. So now you can go to Proppy or VOCAP online, and you put in the month that you want, power, where you are, whether it's a rural location or noisy location, what antennas you've got at both ends, and what mode you're using, most importantly. Obviously, if it's FT8, you stand more chance of making a contact on FT8 to some places than you do sideband. But you can specify this as your station absolutely specifically. And then you run it, you just press the run up prediction button, and it comes up with a set of colored charts like this. So there we go, we got Moscow again. So you can see there that, yep, sun comes up here and the maximum usable frequency rises until it dies down again after the sunset. So you can pick, you want to look for a kind of red color, hot color, basically a hot map, heat map. So you can see what frequency you need to be on roughly. You can also see whether it's possible or not. Now, if you're trying to work Tokyo, for instance, I would say that one there, 10 megs at that time, so from 6 o'clock in the evening till 8 o'clock would be about the best time to do it. Anywhere else out of here, you're not going to work them at all. So this will produce color charts for you for all the same locations as the Radcom one. So it's 26 locations in total, because I said we give long path as well. But you can produce a set of colored charts for a month that will show you exactly what you're likely to be able to work and how and on what band. So that's Proppy, or if you go to rsgb.org/Proppy, it will take you to the same place. So it's rsgb.org/Proppy. So for best conditions then, let's just recap on that. So the K-index must be low. You're going to get much, much better HF propagation with a low K-index, KP index, sort of in the sort of below 3, much, much better. But on the other side of the chart, you also need a high solar flux index. Well, the days of getting solar flux indices of 200, 300 are pretty much gone now until the next sunspot cycle. But we're in that kind of a marginal zone between 100 and 200. So we've got 128 at the moment. It's been up to 140, 150. But the higher the number there, the better. So you need that to be as high as possible and that one to be as low as possible. So that's the thing to look for. Low KP index and a high solar flux index. So tonight I just checked, we're on a solar flux index of 128, marginal, not bad. And a K index of about 1 or 2. So not bad, not bad. And if it continues like this tomorrow, it probably won't know, it would probably be good conditions for HF. I imagine conditions on HF were not bad today. I didn't actually listen, but that's what you look for. Low K index, high solar flux index. So we put it all together then. So high solar flux levels are generally good for HF. Solar flares, coronal mass ejections, high KP and AP indices are generally bad. They give you high absorption, lower ionization in the F region, and lower MUFs. The solar wind speed figures and show you the direction of the interplanetary magnetic field, or BZ, give you a real-time indication of what the bands you should concentrate on. So if you go to solarham.com and have a look at that, that will show you what the current, what the current conditions are like. So that's worth having a look at those as well. And also you then got a situation where it's seasonal. So spring, autumn, and winter are better than summer. So the ionosphere is cooler, denser, and the MUF is higher during the day in spring, autumn, and winter than it is in summer. And the ionic composition is different in winter. So what we find in winter is we have a higher concentration of oxygen and N2 molecules, which are easier to, well, not so easy to actually break down. But what we find is that nighttime MUFs are also higher in summer. So this is why, you know, the month you're working or the season you're working in is very, very important. So, you know, we won't get really good propagation to North America now until about October. But at the moment, we've got pretty good propagation down into South America, which we won't have in October, if you see what I mean. So I think you've got to check where you want to work and what conditions are like, because you may find that wait a couple of months, it'll be much better for you. But yes, so at the moment, as I said, we've had good paths down to South America and the Caribbean on the higher bands, but not very good paths to the States. So these are things we have to think about. And the opposite is true in the Southern Hemisphere. So they have, you know, spring and autumn is a different, well, spring and autumn are very, very similar. So spring and autumn is good for transit equatorial contacts. So if you're trying to work down into South Africa, for instance, spring and autumn are good months for that. Summer's not so good, and winter isn't so good either. So as the sun gets higher, the delay absorption grows, we've said, but the MUF also rises. So you've got to follow the MUF up during the day and down at night. You've got to follow that and see where it goes. So certainly use the RADCOM prediction tables, and you can use the vocap.com tables as well. I'll just leave this slide up there for a second so you can have a look. Or you can use Proppy, which is soundbites.asia/Proppy. And you can also see the UK monthly charts. I have vocap-based monthly charts at G0KYA.blogspot.com. They're quite useful as well. So you just dial up what month you're looking at, and then you can slide it around in terms of the time of the day. And you can see how propagation shifts from west to east. No, east to west, beg your pardon. Propagation goes from east to west as the day goes on. Right, so any questions now? I'll just mention a few other things. So understanding HF propagation, which is basically this presentation, but a few years old now, is on YouTube. Understanding VHF propagation is another YouTube video that's there. There's a free ebook you can get from G0KYA.blogspot.com if you follow the free ebook link there. And there's also Radio Propagation Explained, which is not so cheap, not so free, because that's from the RSGB, I'm afraid. But that's about £10, I think you have to pay for that one. But I'll open up to any questions now. And thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks from us, Steve. Thank you very much indeed. It is, yeah, it's a refresher for a lot of us. I suppose I've seen this before, haven't I? But it was very fresh to me as well, and I hope it was helpful to everybody at home. We can't understate really how important it is, because unless you just want to take a chance on it, it probably would change what area you've got up and what your plans maybe even are to look at it. So, and your forecast, as we should say, goes both on the Norfolk Amateur Radio Club website and newsletter every weekend, and of course that's shared with the RSGB as well. So thanks very much for your talk so far, Steve. We haven't really got any questions yet, but I'm hoping there will be some, or some suggestions. One comment though from Jim, which came in very early on in it, and he just said, actually current predictive skills do manage about a week ahead and has a useful trend regularly up to 10 days. It's moved on a lot. Actually, I'm just thinking that might have applied to my comment about the weather more than what you're saying. So that's an interesting contrast though, isn't it? That we can now predict the weather more or forecast it more. However, propagation can still be a bit up in the air. So
yeah, I think the thing with propagation is that, as I said, it's very hard to know what the sun's about to do, and it can change in an instant. You can have a solar flare suddenly occur in an instant. You didn't know it was coming at all. For that solar flare could then lead to a CME, a coronal mass ejection, which means that, okay, so the solar flare has just knocked out HF for maybe an hour, but you've got a CME coming in 2 days. It's going to cause disruption for a few days. So very hard to predict much more than well, I said the Met Office refused to do anything other than 4-day forecasts. I talked to them a lot about it and said, look, could you possibly push that out to maybe 10 days? And they said, no, we can't. It's too hard. So yeah, there's an awful lot of factors at play, and that's the trouble with HF propagation, that you've got to really get your head around it. And I was just checking, and as I said, the Met Office is currently saying that tomorrow is likely to be unsettled, magnetic disturbances for tomorrow. So yeah, that KP index is likely to go up tonight or earlier in tomorrow morning, and conditions aren't likely to be very good. So that's what would it be? Thursday, isn't it? So what will it be like Friday and Saturday? That's a tricky one. We'll have to see.
Okay. A moment ago, you said, by the way, another reminder for everybody at home, we haven't got any questions or any comments yet, but please do ask them right now if you can. But you said a moment ago, when you've asked the Met Office whether they can push it out maybe to up to 10 days or something, no, that's very hard. Does that mean it's technically possible, but they just haven't got the manpower, computer power, or whatever to do it? Because what is the answer to that?
Well, I think it's a case of, it's not about the computing power. It's just they are unable to guess what the sun's going to do. But let me put it this way: NOAA produces a 27-day forecast, and it's seldom right. Seldom right. I often say, oh, next week we didn't expect this, we didn't expect that, and expect the other. They're seldom right. We do know, as I said, if we've had really, really bad conditions 27 days later, when the sun rotates around one complete circle, we might get them again. But it's very, very hard to predict what's going on. What we do know, and what we can say, is generally, okay, so we're on the downward portion of the sunspot cycle. So that means we're going to have more solar flares, more coronal mass ejections, and we're going to have more coronal hole. And it's coronal holes that cause the solar wind speed to, go up. So we can generally say that. We can say, okay, we're now heading into summer, which is not going to be good for HF, but we will have sporadic E in May. So you can generalize and say these sorts of things. And if you wanted to work America on 80 meters, for instance, then I know that December and January are very, very good months for that. But on a day-to-day basis, it's very hard to actually work out what's going on.
So do you, with the knowledge that we have, and I suppose there might still be things we don't fully understand, but do you think that this will get better as computing power gets even greater? And if I dare mention those two letters, AI, which we hear about so much and affecting so much of technology and things, is that do you think we're ever going to get to the state where we'll get to be able to forecast longer term than just the few days that you're talking about now?
Oh dear. Well, that's a tricky one, isn't it? I think things will get better, I think they will find ways of predicting when we're going to have solar flares, or by looking at sunspots and measuring their magnetic sort of characteristics, they can predict whether that's likely to be, more likely to produce a solar flare. If we have a solar flare, as I said, we have a CME comes off the solar flare, that causes problems as well. So I think if you put it all together and you spend 24 hours a day doing this, you probably could get a better prediction. But I don't think we'll ever have it 100%.
No, and there's nature will always be maybe unpredictable in that way.
Yep.
So we've got a couple of comments and questions for you now as well. Firstly, from Mike G4DYC. Thanks. He says, thanks, Steve, for a very succinct presentation. Are ionosounders and chirpers still used? And the second part of his question, are satellites nowadays used as well for propagation analysis?
Yeah, well, first of all, ionosondes are used, absolutely, to sort of probe the ionosphere and see what's happening all around the world. We have one in Chiltern, which this used to confuse me. I assumed they meant the Chiltern Hills, but they don't. They mean Chiltern, it's actually south of the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory, which is near Oxford. That's where Chiltern is. We've got one. We used to have another one at Fairford, but the information from that is no longer available to us. So to be honest, the Chiltern one is getting a bit old now and is wearing out. If you want to know the basics of it, it uses a 486 computer, and they're running out of 486 computers.
Oh my goodness, man, I bet they are.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I know.
I haven't heard those three letters, three numbers for some years now.
No, well, that's the problem. That the Ionosonde or the Digisonde there uses a 486 computer, and they've bought them up as many as they can, and they just keep replacing them as they give up the ghost. But to replace the Digisonde, I think would be something like £50,000, and no one's prepared to do it.
No.
So Chiltern is not a terribly reliable ionosonde. So we use the Daub one. Daub is in, is it Belgium or France? I can't remember now.
I think Belgium, maybe.
Belgium. Yeah, Daub in Belgium. So we use that Digisonde as well, and that's the one that powers PropQuest. So yeah, it's tricky, but they are all over the world, and it's a case of I can show you where you can get a list of where all the ionosondes are. There used to be one on the Falkland Islands, but I think that one gave up the ghost some time ago because that was run by RAL as well, Rutherford Appleton Laboratory. So yeah, but they're useful. They're the most useful tool we've got in terms of what's actually happening with radio propagation now. I think in some respects, I mean, they're a scientific tool, absolutely. He mentioned something called chirp sounders.
I was going to say chirpers is what he said.
Yeah, chirp sounders. They were something that does a very similar job in a way, but I don't think they're much use around here. I think in the States they've got quite a few of those sort of set up. But it's a similar sort of thing, probing the ionosphere with radio waves and see what comes back. Satellites, yes, and spacecraft, yes. They can probe the ionosphere from above now with satellites, so they can do experiments that way to see, what the ionization is like. And spacecraft pointing the other way towards the sun have been very, very useful because even if it's cloudy, it tells you exactly what's going on. I mean, we take for granted now that we've got these pictures of the sun, fantastic pictures of the sun from NASA spacecraft. But yeah, that's all thanks to NASA and ESA. In fact, believe it or not, do you know where the lenses and the focal plane images, do you know where those sensors are made?
No.
Chelmsford.
Wow.
Yeah.
Home of Marconi Equipment Company, anyway.
It's a company called E2V who...
Oh, I've heard of them. Yes.
Yeah.
I have.
And I visited them a few years back, and it was astonishing because they have fantastic equipment, and they produce these fantastic sensors for these spacecraft, but nobody's hardly ever heard of them. And I said, you really ought to do more for your PR, you really should. But yeah, E2V is the company. So Britain produces some of the sensors for those spacecraft. Wonderful.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, maybe even a slight hangover. I mean, I when I lived in Cambridge, I had a good friend and later became a working sort of partner. He lived in Chelmsford, and as Pi and Philips were to Cambridge, Chelmsford was very much Marconi. And even though the Marconi company got smaller, as did Pi and Philips, the engineers and the people that were still left, I think that might have something to do with some of these spin-off companies. So maybe E2V is one of those.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to remember now. It's so long ago I wrote the story, but it's I think there was something to do with English Electric. You know, the company.
Yeah, I think you might. Isn't it English Electric Valve? Isn't that what E2V stood for? So E times 2. Yeah, I was trying to think, Steve, as you were saying it, and what I thought.
It was English Electric Valve. That's right.
Which wouldn't sound very cool on the latest sensors, would it? To put English Electric Valve Company, it wouldn't quite be the good PR that you'd imagine a company. So wonderful that they've sort of reinvented themselves really and gone into using modern technology.
Yeah.
So thanks. Okay, now a comment and a thanks from Jim G0KYA. Many thanks for highlighting how much info is out there. But can we re-emphasize that we should all get into the habit of using these resources to match up to experienced conditions? And by the way, he says as well, he mentioned that earlier comment was about the weather as opposed to about propagation.
I'm glad he said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're working on a project at the moment for August, which people might be interested in. It's early days yet, but basically there's a solar eclipse happening in August, 12th of August, I think it is. And we're coming up with some experiments that people can play with when this eclipse happens. It's going to be a partial eclipse over the UK, but quite an extreme partial eclipse. I think about 80-90% of the sun's covered. So we're working out some experiments that people can do on medium wave and other bands as well to actually see how it affects propagation. But there'll be more of that in Radcom in August anyway.
Yeah, I look forward to that. That's really good. Yeah, it has quite an effect. That when we had the last full solar eclipse here, I was involved still with my company making science equipment and sensors and things, and it was quite amazing how much happened. And although, yes, you could detect, of course, it getting darker and slightly cooler, your body tends to compensate for a lot of these things, and your eyes certainly do. So it was quite dramatic to see it on a graph, a live data logging, of how much the light changed, and to say the temperature. So to see the effects on propagation will be wonderful. So I think that'll be a great article in Radcom.
Yeah, well, we found out last time that we said check for BBC Radio Scotland, which is on 810 kilohertz. And what we found was the signal came up due to delay absorption disappearing. So people were amazed to find that they could suddenly hear Radio Scotland during the day, and then it faded out again as the eclipse went on. I'm not trying to prejudge what...
No, it'll be good. And also, I don't know if this helps you, Steve, but I think it's September that Radio 4 Longwave is going to be finally switched off. So if you want something on that sort of frequency, 198, I think.
198,
kilohertz, then that will you'll just be in time for that window before it's finally gets switched off.
Yeah, we are happy to do something on 198 as well, but we'll have to see, because propagation at long wave is a little bit different to propagation at medium wave. And I'm not too sure what the effect will be. It may be that 198 gets stronger. Maybe that it has very little effect. We'll have to see.
One of your team, Gwyn, was he did a lot of work on the last solar eclipse in the US, didn't he?
Yeah.
Interesting work. Well, thank you for this evening. But one quick question has just come in from Roger G3LDR. Have you done any research into LDEs at various parts of the cycle?
Long delayed echoes. We've got a member of Propagation Studies Committee who is specialising in LDEs, and he did a load of work looking at trying to find LDEs and couldn't find any. That doesn't mean that long delayed echoes. This is where you basically key your transmitter and you hear it come back at you sort of 2 seconds, 3 seconds later. And he came to the conclusion that it was probably ducting, some sort of ducting, long distance ducting, with the radio signals going out beyond the Earth and then coming back in again. But I'll tell you a funny story there. He set up a Morse transmitter which keyed a particular sequence, and and it was on one of the amateur bands, and this just used to run every night. And someone reported it to RSGB. They said it was a Russian. Thought it was just sending random code. They said it turned out it was him.
Oh,
He lives in Scotland now, so I don't know if he's going to be running it again this winter. But yeah, he did quite a bit of work with it. But LDEs, long delayed echoes, are very hard to find. Yeah, but we came to the conclusion it was possibly long distance echoes were caused by ducting that may have gone out and round, so almost to the moon and back, but very hard. I don't think we proved much at all, really.
all right. Well, Steve, thank you for your presentation this evening, and a bigger thank you really for your work you and your team do for Propagation, sharing this with us, helping us make the best of the bands. And let's be honest, we're slightly on a downward cycle probably now, so we'll need to look at Propagation even more thoroughly to make the most of our hobby. So thanks for all that you do for the hobby, and thanks for this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And there we are. So more about Propagation. I don't think you can ever find out too much about it, because I said no matter what your rig, no matter what your aerials and how good your setup or not ever, we're still dependent totally on Propagation to make it work. So thanks to Steve and his team. That's almost it for this NARC Live. As I said, we won't be here back again here for another 3 Wednesdays actually. So look at the new, what's happening in the next week on the club. On Saturday we've got the Koblenz Sked at 9 o'clock. But do join in at least and listen in as well on that 145,250 megahertz. The local talking might be even more important to do that this time, to see if anybody is making contact with our friends in Germany. Hope that will go ahead though. On Sunday at 7 p.m, the GB2RS News on GB3MB. And then on Monday night, the Monday Night Net with Steve, G3EVA, also on GB3NB repeater at 7:30. And then next Wednesday, Social Informal at CNS between 7 and 9:30 with Bright Sparks for our youngsters, and also the following Wednesday at CNS. So we'll see you back here in 3 Wednesdays time. Do keep sending those pictures in though, and I've already, in fact we haven't had quite such a response for such a long time to the what on earth, but not all are right. So have a go and do enter that. We look forward to getting your pictures, your news, and we will see you in 3 Wednesdays time. Until then, from Tammy.
Bye-bye.
And from me, David G7URP. Take care of yourselves. Look after each other. Bye-bye.